Hey, it's Jordan. I am here in a wonderful garden, one of the few in Flint that I've seen this beautiful. We got some chickens over there and plants and all this harvesting. It's really nice. And I'm with Vicky Marks, who I've interviewed before. You're a Flint resident who has been affected by the water crisis. 2 days ago was the 9-year anniversary. And every time I come back here, you see less and less people out. It's frankly a little bit more depressing each time. I mean, you can't really describe it unless you come. There's just almost like Flint has become a giant deflated balloon, I would say.
Apathy is deep.
Apathy is deep. And which is understandable, because in America, if you've been poisoned by your government and then nothing really has been done other than to cover it up for 9 years, it's understandable people would kind of lose hope. Remind folks how the water crisis affected you.
Well, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's. So that, kind of put a hitch in my get along.
Did the doctors think it could be related to the water?
Yeah, the neurologist thought, he says, lead could have caused it. He says, manganese would be more likely, but they don't test for manganese, so God knows what was in the water that I was drinking. All they test for is lead and copper. They don't test for any arsenic or anything else. So,
and we do know the few independent testers that tested in Flint found a goddamn periodic table of elements of contaminants. So the media only focused on lead, copper. They did not focus on the bacteria, PFAS, which are the forever chemicals, and a whole host of other things. And crazily enough, I'm sad to say I'm not shocked. Just yesterday I interviewed a gentleman. He had a case of Legionnaires in 2021. So obviously Legionnaires was the deadly bacterial outbreak that killed, according to the state, 12 people. It was definitely a lot more than 12 people. But it was a bacterial outbreak that came from the toxic Flint River water in 2014 and 2015. But the media and the government made it seem like it was contained to the early part of the crisis. But I always heard kind of whispers that there's Legionnaires cases again in years later. And the guy I interviewed, he had it in 2021 in July. Legionnaires thrives in the hot summer months because bacteria thrives in the heat. And he wasn't using air conditioning because he's on disability and couldn't afford it. So he was taking 4 showers a day to cool off. And when he was in the hospital, the CDC called, federal CDC, to talk to him. He explained that it can't be from anything other than the water because we weren't using AC. We don't leave our house, and I was taking 4 showers. They ended the conversation real quick, and they never followed up. So who knows if there's been, as of 2 years ago or even now, Legionnaires in the water.
Exactly. But Flint's fixed. Story's over. Move on, folks. Nothing left here to see.
And what do you think about that? Because like so many others I've talked to, at the beginning of this crisis, people weren't like overly political, but they just maybe thought, hey, this is America, the government will fix it, and had hope because the media had come and the politicians were here and they were saying all the right things. And then you look at 5 years later, you still don't have Medicare for all. The pipes still have not been changed. The water's still contaminated. 7 years later, same thing. 9 years later, same thing. The EPA keeps saying the water testing is fine. I talk to residents when I'm not here and now when I'm here. They're telling me the water smells like sewer. They're telling me there's black particles coming out of the water. People are still getting rashes. I trust the residents more than I do the EPA. Is the water fine in Flint?
No. You see, I've got 6 rain barrels total. I don't drink the water, cook with it. I don't water my vegetables with it, or with the city water. I started with the rain barrels like 10 years ago because the cost of the water was so high and I couldn't afford to water my garden. So I thought, well, I'll get a rain barrel. Well, I've since added 5 to them. And I filter all my own drinking and cooking water.
And didn't the city give you grief for the rain barrels? They didn't like that you were doing that?
No,
Okay.
they haven't. They don't know. They don't care.
Okay.
I mean, basically, city government's worthless.
Yeah.
They're right down there with the state and federal government, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. So, but when I I'll take a quick shower like 3 times a week, and every time I get out, it's like digging. I'm so dry. But they went and replaced the mains 2 years ago on Court Street. So everybody thinks, oh, your water's fine. Nope. I says the water still has to come from the plant on Dort Highway through all those broken, crappy pipes. I says, and then run through here and run into our house. Plus, we've had 18 main breaks since they replaced them.
And I think that's really important because the media only really talked about the service lines that go from the curb into your home, but they were not replacing the mains that run underneath the street, and they have not given anybody money that I know of for interior plumbing.
Nope.
So it's like, does anyone think that the toxic water just skipped over the mains and skipped?
Yeah. But yeah, of course, they don't mention that. And I says that's because they don't have to deal with it.
Right.
The media prints what the government tells them to, or vice versa. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there's no democracy in the United States. The people that own the country are the corporations, and they bought and paid for all the politicians. So nothing's going to get done. We're never going to get justice. Nobody's going to go to frickin' jail. Everybody's going, oh yeah, Nessel, Whitmer, we got Democrats in there. They're going to fix things. What's Witless do? She stops the water pods because Nestle was giving us 1,000 bottles a week free, which comes to maybe, a bottle and a half?
How messed up is that, by the way, that Nestle, multi-billion-dollar international corporate conglomerate, is basically stealing water from the Michigan aquifer.
For $200 a year.
For $200 a year, they pay for a permit. $200 a year, they get to basically take millions of gallons from the aquifer. This is the Great Lakes, after all.
Put it in polluting plastic bottles.
Yeah.
And then sell it to everybody and make profit off of it.
But out of the kindness of their heart, they're donating
100,000 bottles a week. You got 88,000 people that live in Flint. That comes to maybe a bottle and a half per resident per week. But Whitmer's going, oh no, they're still doing it. Well, they stopped that in January or whatever. So now there's no free water anymore for anybody.
And I think that's really important because the narrative has been the water's now safe. But if the churches are no longer handing out the bottled water, if Nestle is not generously giving a bottle and a half per week, then kids, the elderly, or the immune-compromised people, most people don't have the extra money with inflation and everything else to buy stacks and cartons of bottled water. So then people going back to drink from the tap. And as we've talked about, I've spoken with engineers, I've spoken with chemists, Aaron Brockovich, others. I don't think there's any way to 100% say the water is not contaminated here. Mm-hmm. So that means people are still drinking, almost a decade later, contaminated water. I feel like there's been more money put into PR, marketing, to sweep this under the rug than actual real money put in to just solve the damn problem.
Right. Yeah. If they would have used all that money that first came into Flint, instead of sending it to Governor Snyder to give $55 million to redo the Capitol Theater downtown, who most residents can't afford to go in there anyway, or send $69,000 to the YMCA in Lansing to redo them. What's that got to do with us being poisoned in Flint?
And that's the cover up on top of the cover up on top of the cover up. The state of Michigan under Rick Snyder earmarked, the state legislature in Lansing earmarked, I don't know, I think it was like a $370 million that was supposed to go towards Flint water relief. Reports found that you had millions going to banks, real estate firms, nonprofits, law firms, all the goodies and all the special interests. Supposedly, there was columns that said unknown, millions of dollars unknown.
$93 million that they have no accounting for. And then you've got like Bruno Mars and Beyonce and those that donated millions of dollars. Where did that go? Community Foundation, Mott in Flint. Where did that go? Have no clue, because we've never seen a penny of it. But everybody's going, Mott is fine. Mott's right up there with the government. I mean, they own Flint.
And just so you know, Mott, named after Charles Stewart Mott, who was one of the founding investors in General Motors. From what I hear, he was okay, I guess. But
he was a racist, and also people seem to forget that he wanted the National Guard to come in here and shoot all the friggin' sit-down strikers so they would get back to work.
I stand corrected. Tony told me, the late Tony Palladino, used to speak glowingly of him, saying that his offspring was the problem, but apparently he wasn't so great either.
No, back during the sit-down strike, he was the one that pushed to get the National Guard in here. He wanted them to go in the plants and shoot the sit-down strike.
But essentially, Mott, it's a foundation, but it basically controls everything in Flint. The politicians do whatever they say because it's the purse strings that fund so much of it. And based on my reporting, Mott played quite a role behind the scenes in causing the water crisis in the first place. But, I just asked because we're looking now at East Palestine. We're looking now, Detroit has problems, Milwaukee, Pittsburgh, Indiana just had a plastics plant on fire. Every other day I'm seeing plants on fire, railroads exploding.
Trains derailing left and right. I mean, there's like 3 trains a day that are derailing.
And then I feel like there's a playbook that they started here that they're now using everywhere else, where the EPA comes in or the railroad company comes in and they do their testing. And magically, even though there's petrochemical bombs exploding, they say, well, the water's testing fine, the air is testing safe, the soil's testing fine. Meanwhile, people have nosebleeds, dizziness, nausea, burning of their eyes, chemical burns. And I feel like they're getting away with it in these places because they got away with it here.
Yep, it's been 9 years. Flint's still not fixed. Nobody's gone to jail. So, yeah, it worked in Flint. We'll do it in East Palestine. We'll do it in wherever.
Yeah.
Because it worked in Flint. They got away with it. We can too.
Let's talk about those who got away with it. Something that's, I think the Michigan media might as well be asleep. They don't seem to ever ask any questions of the current Attorney General. The Cliff Notes version, I won't get into the whole thing. There was an investigation in 2016 to 2019. That was the first initial Flint water investigation. From what I could tell in my reporting, it was going in the right direction. It was building momentum. They had charged 15 state and city officials with everything from involuntary manslaughter to misconduct in office to financial crimes, because there was a financial scheme that was the reason Flint was using the Flint River in the first place. And this current Attorney General, a Democrat, she came in. She was saying how they were incompetent, it was taking too long. She did something that lawyers I spoke with said they've never seen before. She fired the whole investigation team, including the special prosecutor. She started from scratch, so basically eliminated a prior 3-year investigation. She dropped charges against 8 state and city officials, saying she was going to recharge them, but the right way. She recharged a lot of them, but a lot of them got recharged with lesser crimes. Then a year and a half later, in 2022, basically the Michigan Supreme Court threw out all the charges, including against Governor Snyder.
His big $1,000 fine misdemeanor that he got hit with.
He was charged. Nestle's team charged this governor, who, based on my reporting, was helping to cover up the deadly Legionnaires outbreak. He knew about it a year and a half earlier than he notified the public, yet she only charged him with a misdemeanor. And all of that was thrown out because the Michigan Supreme Court said the Attorney General's office violated the Constitution. They used a one-man grand jury, which is a secretive process. It's basically a judge to issue indictments. And now, as far as I could tell, I've reached out to their office twice this week, just asking very simply, you say there's an ongoing investigation. What is the ongoing investigation? Because the Supreme Court has thrown out your charges. The
statute of limitations is done.
They appealed it, they lost. The statute of limitations for most of these crimes has passed. The only one that I can see that still has less than a year now is involuntary manslaughter, because that's 10 years. And they haven't gotten back to me. So to me, I'm talking to residents, including the former mayor, said it seems that it was almost intentional incompetence, that they did this on purpose to, I don't know, screw up.
Not incompetence, intentional. Yeah.
Why do you think that they're handed this investigation? My reporting that has been confirmed by others, the first investigation team that Nessel fired, they were building a case against Snyder for involuntary manslaughter. So why would they intentionally just sabotage all of it?
Because that's what they were told to do.
Let it out.
When Nessel was running for Attorney General, I went down to the library and had a little question and answer thing, and I asked her, I says, what are you going to do about the settlement, the civil case? She says, no doubt you people have been poisoned, you've been done wrong. She says, first thing I'll do is go in there and settle it. Well, she fought tooth and nail, took the lawyers to the Supreme Court, the state court, everyone she could, to try to get out from paying a penny to us. And this is the person that is also supposed to be prosecuting these criminals. So not only did she try to get our civil cases thrown out, so we won't get our whole $600 million, which will be $400 million, which is bullshit. Not only did she fight against us getting a penny from the civil cases, she also hired these incompetent women, one black, one whatever, which everybody thought, wonderful, women of color, things are going to get done. Bullshit. So nobody's been charged in the criminal cases. I says, and she fought tooth and nail to keep us from getting any civil money, which we still have not seen a penny of, and God knows when we will.
And I think that's an important point too, because it seemed to me, just so you understand, the audience, basically the Attorney General says there's a wall, there's a conflict wall. So on one end of the Attorney General's office, they are prosecuting the state of Michigan. So they're going after Governor Snyder and his administration. But on the other end of that conflict wall, they're defending the state of Michigan. So attorneys from the Attorney General's office were defending some of the people in the Snyder administration. So the first investigation said that is a conflict of interest. You can't have the Attorney General's office both prosecuting and defending, so they outsourced it. They hired an outside special prosecutor who was not paid by the state, which I think was sensible.
Yeah.
But when the Attorney General came in, she said, no, we could do both. We just have to have a conflict wall where there's no collaboration or communication. That wall is about as invincible as, it's a joke. So basically, it seems to me that when the Attorney General came in, and let's not forget the governor, because she had interest in lowballing the residents of Flint. Michigan is not like the federal government. They don't have unlimited money they could print. So let's say they settled for what they should have, which in my opinion was closer to $2 billion. Then Governor Whitmer wouldn't have a lot of money for whatever she wants to do. So it seems to me that Nessel and Whitmer's focus was, let's get the civil settlement done before charging any criminal charges. Let's get the civil settlement done, and let's not go forward with the financial fraud charges, because if they would have went forward with the financial fraud charges, which were related to
RICO.
which were related to the privatization scheme. They basically had Flint, who was bankrupt, borrow $85 million to join a brand new water system that it didn't need to join. Let's say they actually would have went after the financial fraud. Let's say they would have went after Snyder with tougher charges. That civil settlement bill probably goes up significantly. Mm-hmm. And it seems they didn't want to pay that.
Yep. And the thing is we're paying back that $85 million for the KWA water, which we don't even use. Flint is still getting our water from Detroit. The KWA water is going everywhere else. So, yeah.
Let me ask you just like a big picture. Because you turn on the news, national news, even local news. It's Trump, who's up, who's down in the Republican presidential primary, talking about the various investigations into Trump, talking about, just politics, talking about Russia and Ukraine, talking about whatever sensational bullshit, Kanye West, whatever. Meanwhile, and by the way, Flint's not the only community that's ever been poisoned. Go ask the Native Americans. They dump everything next to Native American reservations.
We were poisoned by policy.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you have American citizens that were poisoned by their own government. There was a cover-up, and now they've been left to slowly die, and it's never on the news anymore. I don't even mean this arrogantly, but as far as I know, I'm the only national reporter here. Yeah. This is my 19th time.
Yep.
I got 2 back surgeries to prove it.
Yep.
Probably a 3rd coming up, and it's just mind-numbing to me. What kind of country can this happen, and it just gets quietly swept under the rug? Unless it's not really a democracy, it's just a oligarchy where...
Yeah. What kills me, what I've noticed, the few times that I've heard Flint mentioned in the last couple weeks, is the stupid-ass reporters are still saying because Flint decided to switch its water to the Flint River. They can't even get that right. Flint, anybody that lived in Flint, well, except for Sheldon Neely, knows that the Flint River is a sewer hole. DuPont, GM, the chemical plant that's still dumping chemicals in the river right now, have been dumping in that river for 100 years. But they're saying it was Flint that decided that they were going to switch from the Detroit water to the Flint River water. Flint had nothing to do with that. I mean, well, the people of Flint knew better than that. But yeah, the few, I don't watch news unless I try to catch a weather report.
Well, obviously,
Status Coup.
Status
Coup, yeah.
Gotta make sure.
But as far as the local media, the national media, they all got on there and said the same thing. Well, yeah, it's been almost 9 years since Flint decided to change its water and got lead poisoned. And I'm going, after 9 years, they still don't have the story straight. Even the local reporters are saying the same shit.
Not only do they not have the story straight, they have intentionally chosen not to report new information. Mm-hmm. I literally went down to the Flint Journal 2 years ago.
2 years ago, yeah.
We created a packet for them just to break it down for dummies. Because we had just broken a story in The Intercept that the governor's top officials deleted their phones right before the launch of a criminal investigation. A bunch of other stuff in that story, including the governor was refusing to hand over documents to the prosecutors. I handed it to him. I said, I would think the Flint Journal wants to inform the Flint residents that destruction of evidence, they never covered it.
Yeah.
They never mentioned it. Detroit Free Press, I handed them a story showing that the governor, his chief of staff, his health director were all on the phone 22 times in 2 days in 2014, right when Legionnaires was blowing up in Flint. Prosecutors had concluded that was Snyder covering it up. they said, thank you, we don't have the resources to cover. I even said, throw one of your reporters' names in front of mine so you guys could get top billing. I don't need the credit. I'd already done the story, and they wouldn't do it. So it seems to me the media here is in on it.
They're owned. Same as our government officials. They're owned by the corporations. Corporations don't want this shit getting out. They don't want to be liable for it. They just want to sit back and keep collecting their power and their money and fuck the people. And that's part of it. I mean, I keep in contact with a news photographer for the local channel, and I'll send him your stuff. Okay, I'll send it up to the desk. Nothing. I get local residents that'll be on Facebook, and they'll say, well, I heard this and this and this, and I'll send them your story. Oh my God, blah, 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 blah. So he lets 15 more people know. Hell, 3/4 of the people in Flint have no clue what's going on because they listen to this fucking local mouthpieces that are just repeating what they're told. They haven't got an investigative bone in their bodies.
And that's the part that really burns me. Besides how hard I and we have worked on breaking the stories, what upsets me the most, I would say 90% of Flint doesn't know about any of the information I've reported.
No.
Because, and even though it was in national outlets like The Guardian, Vice, The Intercept, Metro Times, because the media here never picked it up and never even followed up. That's what a normal, healthy media system is supposed to be. One outlet or one reporter breaks something, the other outlets then cover it, maybe follow up on it and try to break more. Here, it's the opposite. One outlet or reporter breaks it, and all the rest do everything they can to keep it quiet.
Yeah. Well, that's that Murdoch guy in South Carolina. The
Murdoch,
rich lawyer guy that was convicted of shooting his wife and his son. That was all it was on the news when East Palestine was burning. And it's like, and when they came on there and they said, oh, Murdoch was convicted, and I'm going, big fucking deal. I says, now maybe you can, so shoot him and get it over with. I says, and concentrate on this other shit. Of course, I got banned for 60 days or 30 days on Facebook for saying, well, just shoot him and get it over with, you know. Who gives a fuck what this rich-ass lawyer does in South Carolina when you've got another city being poisoned, the EPA and the local government and the corporation that caused it are all doing their best to cover it up. Yeah.
That's a good segue. My last question. I don't even know if people have an answer, but what would be your message? Because I talked to residents from East Palestine and elsewhere. They're a little earlier in their disaster. It just happened this year or maybe last year. And they're in similar situations to where you guys were in 2015, 2016. People are fighting. Residents are fighting. Divide and conquer. They don't know what to do. They're getting stonewalled or lied to by the EPA or the CDC. They don't know what to do. What's your message to them so that they're not Flint 9 years later, just slowly, quietly, I hate to say it, but we know people are dying here. I mean, every time I come back, more people have died. We're not talking about elderly people. We're talking about people in their 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s, cancers that they don't have family history of, liver failure, kidney failure, strokes, a lot of things that were never officially added to the death count of the Flint water crisis. But most of these people didn't have family history of these things, were healthy before the water switch, and suddenly are dying of cancers and all these things. And I saw a media headline, Flint has a cancer cluster. Could it be connected to the water?
Duh, you think?
What would you tell people elsewhere? You know, what can they do, or what should they do to make sure that almost a decade later they're not in the same space they were?
Well, obviously what we've done in Flint isn't working real well. Melissa Mays, as far as I'm concerned, is the number one person for keeping the story national, well, and you. But as far as protesting or writing or appealing to your governor, we've done it all, and we're still sitting here 9 years later. All I can tell them is keep making noise, and hopefully they have a better result than we do.
Absolutely. Thanks for talking to me again. Beautiful garden.
Thank you.